Hello and welcome back to the Champagne Rugby podcast. Today I'm joined by Adam Malone. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Hamish. Ireland are 3 from 3, so it's always a good way to be.
Yeah, it was a very exciting weekend for the rugby in the Six Nations there. Three very exciting and close games. But most importantly, we have a very special guest for you guys today. Ex-Olympian and international seven-star, now playing his rugby over in Italy. We have Marcus Watson. Marcus, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's been a long time in the making, but we've finally got you on the pod. And how is your transition over to Italy treating you at the moment? It must be a interesting cultural change.
Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a big change for me in general. Really, I've just had my daughter's 9 months. So at the time we moved over, she was 3 months. So she spent most of her life in Italy now. But yeah, the move was pretty hectic. Also, I kind of with the whole WASP thing, I found out pretty late that I wasn't going to be staying. So the whole sort of move was pretty sudden. But yeah, I'm glad I'm here now and enjoying it.
Yeah, how did that look? Like, you obviously were told one day that you weren't staying, and then how fast did it all come about?
Well, mine was a bit of a weird one. There was a couple of us kind of in the same boat. Uh, I don't know the ins and outs of exactly how it worked, but I would assume that somebody sort of maybe with the budget or whatever kind of had an idea of what was going on. So I think this wasn't told directly to me, but I'd assume there was some sort of budget cuts going into the next season. And I think the coaches wouldn't have known anything about it, but we're trying to figure out how to play about it. And I was kind of getting the impression from them anyway that they were keen to keep me from the start of the season. And then it kind of like slowly, I got told this before sort of the start of the season that they were quite keen on keeping me. And then as the season sort of went on, I was kind of waiting for something and nothing kind of came up. And then it pretty much got to the end of the season. And there was a couple of us, and there was like me, Rob Miller, trying to think of who else. Yeah, a few boys, but and then yeah, when you kind of at the time I was pretty gutted because I wanted to stay and then I kind of look and see what's happened, and it kind of all makes a bit of sense now, to be honest, which is brutal because a lot of my good mates obviously were kind of hung out to dry. But yeah, in some ways I kind of dodged a bullet, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So you moved over to Benetton before, just for the people that aren't following the English Rugby League, you moved over to Benetton before Wasps deteriorated and filed for bankruptcy, is correct?
Yeah, that's right. So then I've now been joined by two of my old WAS teammates in Matteo Minozzi and Jacob Imaga as well. So kind of bedding them in as well, which has been good.
Yeah,
But
Jacob's in there with you in the Benetton squad, is he? Did you
that's
say?
right. Yeah, Jacob and Matteo came at the same time. Obviously, Matteo knows all the boys, slotted in fine. I needed no introduction. And then yeah, Jacob pretty much the same. He gets on with. He's a smart, intelligent boy. He gets on with his stuff. So just helped him where I could really.
And
So, did you get a referral fee for that? You did?
I actually I didn't know either of them were coming until I think maybe Jacob I knew a little bit before, but only a couple of days before. It wasn't like a case of the coach just kind of coming up to me being like, "Oh, what do you think of these players?" sort of thing. But it's good to have them both there.
so a question I always like to ask the guests that always interests me is
Mm.
how did you get into rugby, and what was your kind of rise into rugby, and where did that love for the sport, whatever, come from?
So my dad loved rugby, always played rugby, but he never sort of pushed me towards any sports. I played football first and played football. My cousins were pretty keen on football, so just kind of followed them into it. And then I went to a school called St George's in Weybridge in Surrey, and there was no football there. So I'd play rugby on the Saturday for school, and then I play football on Sundays at a club. And I kind of got to 12, 13, which is still probably way too young to make a decision. But I remember at that time thinking I'll probably have to pretty soon. And I just decided rugby, probably because I was better at rugby for a start. Um, and there was just something about sort of running with the ball that I always really enjoyed. And then, yeah, kind of went on through there, played London Irish amateurs with a few boys that actually playing now still, I think. Well, Marlon Yard being one. I'm trying to think of anyone else in that sort of just Sunday club that was playing. Darryl Marfo, if you remember him, he used to play. He played for Scotland, the prop. So that was just in the Sunday team, and then got picked up by London Irish. And
sorry, so in the Sunday team, you had yourself and Marilyn Yard in the back.
That's right, yeah, that's right.
So some poor fellas were rocking up to play their rugby, and the two of you were running riot.
That's right. Yeah, I'm trying to think if we were both playing on the wings. I might have been at fullback and he was on the wing, but yeah, no, it was good times. He came through quite late as well, but yeah.
Jesus. Who would have been your favourite football team growing up?
I don't like admitting this, but I actually supported when I was younger because of my cousins as well. I supported Liverpool when I was younger for no reason other than my cousins enjoying them. And then now I know a little bit more. I'm an Arsenal fan, but you're not supposed to change your teams. But here you go.
Well, Arsenal's not doing too badly this season. They're top of the table, so
I'm enjoying it. I won't lie to you. I'm watching a lot of football at the moment because of that.
Yeah, I can imagine. So after London Irish, you played with them for a couple of seasons, and then you got picked up to Saracens.
That's right. Yeah.
What sort of? How did that sort of come about?
So yeah, I was in the London Irish Academy pretty successful academy actually. To be fair, pretty much everyone's still playing or has played and retired. My move to Saracens was a weird one actually. They tried to do a dual contract situation with 7s and 15s, and it was an absolute calamity. It was terrible. Like, it was just me, Ollie Lindsay Haig, and there was one other that did it as well. I can't remember who else did it. But he was at Quins and 7s, and then basically the way it worked was 7s at that time kind of went part-time, so they tried to fit a whole week between Monday to Wednesday, and we'd stay in a hotel at the Lensbury. So as you can imagine, with 7s, that was quite a lot of training. We'd have pretty much 2 a days Monday, 2 a days Tuesday, 1 training session Wednesday. And then I'd be straight back into Saris, and I think I was training then Thursday and Friday as well. So I was getting no days off. And by 3 months into this, I think I had to have like a hip operation because my labrum, I got a torn labrum from just too much running, I think, really. Ollie Lindsay Haig was absolutely fine because he's like 50 kilos wet through. Not saying I was heavy at that time either, but that plan didn't really work, to be fair. And I was there for 1 season and then just signed for 7s full time.
And what was that sort of process of what was the turning point where you said, okay, I really want to play 7s, and then you went from 15s to 7s?
I think the turning point was, so like I mentioned, I was pretty much injured that whole year at Saris. So I played one A-League game, I think, and then I was not pretty much available for the rest of it. And obviously Saris at that time were doing pretty well. So I kind of, at that stage, just wanted to play rugby because I was kind of caught in a weird situation at London Irish where I played 2 first team games or 3 first team games, but because it was a small squad, I was pretty much like 24th man every game. So I wasn't really playing that much. And at that stage, being young, I kind of thought like, oh, this is good. I'm kind of pretty close to the mixer. Not playing. And but then I was playing under 20, so I had a little bit of game time still. But I think at that stage, you've got to play as much men's rugby as you can to just kind of get used to it. So I think I got a little bit frustrated towards the end of those 2 years that I wasn't playing much. And then when 7s came along, I was playing quite a lot for 7s. And I kind of looked at the way Saris were. I wasn't going to be playing straight away. And 7s was available there. So I went down that route. And then, yeah, to be honest, I don't think I was at Saris for 1 year. I was injured the whole time. So I doubt they would have wanted to keep me anyway.
There, Marcus, you said, as you can imagine, there was a lot of training with 7s. So, like, don't let us imagine. What did it look like? What does 7s training look like compared to 15s?
So it kind of changed over the years. My first 2 years, I had Ben Ryan as a coach. And then my next 2 years, I had Simon Amor as a coach, both unbelievable coaches. Ben Ryan was very much, a training session with him looked pretty similar. It was pretty much like a game-based training, essentially. You'd try and get 7-on-7 as much as possible. not full contact, but it would be kind of shoulders on, and you'd throw the ball out, you just play and keep going for as long as possible. And that was pretty tough because you just keep going. And he'd throw some fitness tests in there as well, speed tests, all that kind of stuff. Like, he was very innovative, because I think that was around the time the GPSs were starting. And I'm pretty sure he was one of the first ones to kind of introduce them into rugby. He'll tell you that he probably was anyway. But so that was interesting, seeing all those stats and stuff. And that was just hard because it was just continuous. Whereas when Simon Amor came, he had a bit more structure to the training, a bit more not skill-based essentially, but there'd be more, what's the word? Yeah, just a bit more structure to the training session. It wouldn't just kind of be a throw the ball and play and see how you go. A little bit more structure to it. And both ways worked. I can see massively why Ben Ryan worked so well in Fiji, to be fair. Just kind of throw the ball and go, because some of them are crazy athletes. And then Simon really kind of got us together, and it was the first time we were properly full-time. So I think that maybe helped him as well. But he was an unbelievable coach, so intelligent when it comes to sevens.
And with Ben Ryan, was it like a tactical periodization situation where, like, you'd be in the match and then he'd pull it up and be like, hey guys, you're not executing X and Y, and then he'd come up with the solutions as a team? Is that kind of how it worked, or
yeah, exactly?
How to just play?
Nah, exactly that. Like, and he was, yeah, that's exactly how it worked. You'd kind of have video footage. He'd kind of show you the ways that he thought what he was really good at as well was like a player-led kind of development situation, where he'd maybe go, look, Marcus, you're a centre, you go with Matt Turner and Dan Norton as a winger, and you kind of decide some of the plays you want to run, come back to me, and we'll see how it goes in training. We'll kind of look at it. But a lot of the time in sevens, you kind of get a lot of your video stuff really from tournaments. So we'd kind of look through previous tournaments and kind of figure out what we thought might work. Whereas Simon might be a bit more, we've got different plans for different teams, which was good. We wouldn't have to change much of the way we wanted to play. It might just be a couple of different little things that we'd notice. Probably more video footage with Simon than maybe Ben. But yeah, like I said, both very good coaches.
So with Simon Amor, would it be like, we're playing Fiji, make sure to tackle the ball and not try and chop tackle them? Would it be something like that?
So the Fiji is the best example I could think of, because with what Simon kind of had against Fiji, and it worked really well. I think we played them in Hong Kong once in a quarterfinal or a semi-final, and I think we maybe nilled them, which I don't think had happened before, like when we were playing them. But because they look for people to just jump out the line, like they've got such unreal feet. If someone steps out, they're gone. So he kind of had this thing where nobody steps out the line. We all just go together. We've got nobody jumping, and just see what happens. And they were kind of waiting for us to do something. And I think it kind of threw them off a little bit. But we didn't really necessarily have to change what we did because of that. And yeah, it just worked really well. It's just stuff like that were ideas that he had. And I'm actually trying to think now. I said that was Simon, but that might have actually been Ben Ryan's idea. Either way, it worked pretty well.
Yeah. Too right. Did you end up winning that game against the Fijians?
We did, yeah. And then I think we did. We got to the final of that tournament actually, and we lost to New Zealand in the final, which happened a few times.
So
Kurt Baker.
That's the one. He would get stuck into people. He was a mouthy player.
Is he?
Yeah, big stuff.
Well, give us some dirt on him. Go on, what would you say?
It was weird. I never had any run-ins with him, but he'd always go at Matt Turner and Dan Norton, always. And like, I just remember thinking, like, sometimes you play against someone, you're like, there's something about this guy that I don't really like that much. So I just didn't really like him that much. And then I met him after the tournament once. I was like, almost didn't really want to like him, but he's such a good bloke. So I was like, oh, fair enough. And then I spoke, now that I've played with some boys that have played with him, they're just like, that's just the way he is. He's a legend of a bloke off the pitch, but loves to just get in people's faces. And you see that everywhere, to be fair. Just one of them.
Who are some of the toughest opponents you've come against in the sevens?
You know who went unbelievable in the sevens was Frank Halai, if you remember him. I think he was actually
Yeah.
the year before I was. And at one point, there was me and Dan Norton were centre and wing partnership. We played against Charles Piatow and Frank Halai a few times. And Charles is a freak, right? But to be honest, at that time, Frank was probably better. At sevens, someone did tell me Charles was getting back from a bad ankle injury at the time. So he was like kind of just finding his feet. Don't get me wrong, bloke was still dangerous, but I just have such a funny, and I remind Norts of this all the time. So we played them in Dubai. They just throw the ball out to Frank Halai. We've spoken to, like, me and Norts have kind of, and the whole team, spoken about how much of a threat he is and trying to stop him from getting the ball. And when he does get the ball, make sure we, get him down early. His first carry, sits down Norts. I turn around and Norts picking up one of his teeth from the floor. And this is a bad start. Safe to say we lost that one as well.
Yeah, hello. You used to wear the number 2 for New Zealand, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Who else did, like Regan Ware, Tim Mickelson? What's he like? Tim Mickelson. He's very quiet, I'd say, on the pitch, is he?
Yeah. There weren't too many run-ins with him in terms of like Mouthy. Literally the only Mouthy sevens player I could think of is Kurt Baker. Everyone else is too tired, but he still gives it some.
And like, what would the South Africans been like Frankie Horn back in the day, Cecil Africa, Branko de Pria, like what were they like?
I used to love playing against South Africa. I felt like when last 2 years, I felt like we played very similar styles of sevens. So we had some good matchups between each other. And like, when you kind of just looked at opposition players, there was like, Dan Norton was always against Sinatla, who was unbelievable. They brought in Colby sometimes as well. So there was like Matt Turner versus him. And Matt Turner at some stages was untouchable when it came to sevens. They had Colonel Hendricks as well, who plays at the Bulls. So I used to be opposite him quite a lot. He's a good player as well.
And De Gaulle as well, wasn't it? Justin De Gaulle?
Oh, he's good. He's good. He's really good. So it'd be like him against Dan Bibby or Tom Mitchell. Like we always had like good kind of one-on-ones against them.
Yeah, Tommy Mitchell. He's some player, lad.
He's the man as well. He's a legend. Hell of a captain.
Did you ever come up against Sonny Bill in the sevens?
Did I? Yes, I would have. No, I didn't actually, because he was in Rio, but he got injured in the second game, and we played them in the third one. So I don't think he played, unless he got injured after it. But no, I don't think I played against him.
What's kind of your thoughts on Sonny as that all-round league union sevens player? Do you think he's a master of all trades, or a jack of none, or a jack of all trades but master of none, or do you think he really came into the sevens and made it his own?
No, I'd say he's definitely mastered a few. The thing that's really interesting about sevens is you had a lot of boys that come over from 15s to try and give that Olympic run a go. And there's only a handful that actually made it. From the top of my head, I can think he did. Who else? Francois Hugard, Juan de Jong. I think the RGs maybe had someone. I think maybe Juan Imhoff maybe came over, actually. So there was only a handful, but then you think of some of the names that tried. So there was like Quade Cooper.
Harry Hain.
Yeah, Harry Habana. There's like there's some names that gave it a go. And I have no doubt with time, a fair few of them would have probably managed to crack it. Like, I have no doubt about that. But what it kind of showed to me was you need a fair bit of time to get your sevens conditioning and almost understanding of how the game goes. Because it got to a point when I first joined, I think you could do the transition pretty easily. And then towards the end, it was like two completely different games. It's just mental, like the fitness levels. So I was, how long was I out of it? Because I was at Newcastle for 2 seasons after sevens. So I only had 1 year out because I came back to play 2 tournaments before the Olympics. And so I kind of thought, yeah, my fitness would be fine. We got into testing straight away. We did we did like a K test. It's literally just 10 lengths. And I thought, okay, I'll go okay in this. And there was like the sevens boys who have played all finished first, and everyone that was involved in 15s like straight afterwards. And I was already in that 15s block. It's mental how quickly you lose it. But yeah, it's just 2 different games at the moment. It takes a bit of getting used to.
So prior to that Olympics, like how did your body composition change from being a 15s player to a sevens player?
So I didn't think it had changed that much. And then I played in London Sevens at the end of my first season at Newcastle. And I'm getting changed, and Simon Amor comes up to me and starts laughing, saying that I've got dumpy. And I'm like, mate, I feel like I look exactly the same. He's like, nah, you put some weight on. I was like, oh, fair enough. And then I could probably tell when I did some of the fitness, because it was a hard 12-week camp. That was a tough 12-week camp.
Yeah, like would you say like what would be the difference between, we'd say, your Bronco at the start of a 15 season or your Bronco at the start of a 7 season? Like what's the difference in your fitness levels, or would you have any numbers to?
I can't remember, because I didn't do that 1K test was quite a random one that we did with sevens, and because we only had 12 weeks to kind of get together, that was the only testing we did fitness wise. So I don't really have a comparison, but all I can say is I reckon my general fitness in sevens, I'd like to think I was kind of middle of the park in terms of the team, maybe slightly higher than that. And then when I came in, I was pretty much bottom. So that was just half a season. And I felt fit playing 15s. When I'd done some of the testing at Newcastle, I felt like I was doing pretty well. So I thought I held on to it, but obviously not. But my first game playing 15s, boys, after 4 years, I remember looking up at the clock, and I was like, right, we've been playing for ages now. It's got to be half time. I think I looked up and it was 16 minutes. I was like, I can't believe this. I was like, this is nuts. It's ridiculous.
So you were at Newcastle 2015, and then you played like half a season, and then you transitioned, or you played the 2015 season, but then you transitioned and went to the Olympics 2016. What was that period kind of like, and how was the Olympics going, and all the build up to that?
Yeah, it was. I was really keen to get back into 15s at some point. I'd spoken to Simon Amor about it, and he was very much kind of backed me with that. Said he thinks it's a good idea for my career, and then said to me, look, there was obviously no promises made whatsoever, but he said, look, we'll keep in contact, because we want to, as long as obviously you're playing still well and everything, we'll try and get you back for the Olympics in terms of the training camp, and then we'll see how it goes from there. So I really enjoyed my first season at Newcastle. I found it frustrating for the first quarter or so, because I wasn't really playing. And then I kind of got into the team, and kept my place and played pretty well. And then there was kind of Simon, I think, called me about the Olympics and said that I'd probably be in the wider squad, but it was still up to Newcastle to release me. And at that point, I wasn't actually sure if they were going to. But Dean Richards, who was awesome with me, my time in Newcastle, came up to me, I think, and just said, look, you need to play a tournament of sevens in the World Series to be able to go to the Olympics. So when the season's finished, you can go do that and then see what happens. And that's pretty much how it worked. Season finished and I went straight into sevens camp with the England boys, played in London, and then I think maybe I had 1 week or 2 weeks off, and then straight into this 12-week camp, which was full on.
And then going into the Olympics, so you've done the 12-week camp, and you're in maybe the fittest condition of your life. How did it feel being selected for the Olympic squad?
Well, actually, so that was the thing. The 12-week camp was brutal, but I still don't think I was at my fittest at all, because that's just how long I reckon you need to get sevens conditioned, which is crazy. Like, I think you pretty much get like half a season. But yeah, anyway, it was unbelievable. Sort of being announced in that squad, I felt very good going into it. But competition was the places were pretty high. So there was kind of me and Mark Bennett with the centres, and I was kind of playing a bit of wing as well. So there was Dan Norton too. I'm trying to remember if there was another wing. I think there was a few people who could cover wing, including sort of myself. And yeah, Mark Bennett had been unbelievable in some of the warm-up games and stuff. So it was kind of between me and him, and we got on really well as well. So that was good in terms of competition. But yeah, I just remember turning up to kind of the Olympic Village, and it was like someone described it to me as human Jurassic Park, which is just the best way to describe it. Like, I think we turned up and I seen this Australian guy, and he must have been about 7 foot tall, a basketball player, and then like I could probably walk through his legs, and then I go further on, and there's some of the gymnasts who could easily like walk through mine. It was just mental, but it was such a cool experience.
Yeah, how did it, like, obviously in the World Series in sevens, you're all going around together, but then the Olympic Village, like, it must be crazy. Like, who would be the famous athletes you would have seen? Like, would you seen any of the like, obviously you've seen an Australian basketball player. Would you seen any of the US boys? Would you see any of the big soccer players?
Yeah, so I thought the same thing. I was like, look, none of these big guys are going to be staying at the Village. First day there, saw Venus and Serena Williams in the lunchroom, which was nuts. Second day there was the first time where I was like, what's going on? Kind of because the lunchroom is enormous. Like, I can't even tell you how big it is. And we were sitting down, and there was like a bit of commotion to sort of our left. And I look over, and there's loads of people trying to get selfies because like Usain Bolt was there sitting down trying to have some food, but he didn't last long. Like, he literally had to run out of the lunchroom because everyone was trying to take photos of him. To be honest, at that point, I kind of felt a bit like, this guy's got no peace. He's probably come here a little bit thinking maybe I'll get some time to kind of get away from the cameras, but that didn't work out for him.
Sorry, when you say everyone, you're talking about athletes. Olympic athletes are trying to do that.
Yeah, like loads of athletes were just straight up in his face trying to take selfies with him and stuff. He had to like run out of the lunchroom. It was nuts.
So it sounds like you were pretty level-headed about it, but was there any boys who would have like struggled to separate being a fan and being an Olympian?
So there wasn't in our team, but when I went to Wasps, Juan de Jong was there, who was part of the South African team. And mate, I've never met a bloke who takes more pictures or videos in my entire life. Like, the guy loves it. Like, he's a social media guy. Like, he's funny with it. But he went through his photos of like him in the Village, and he's got like he got a photo of Djokovic, but Djokovic was like, there was a fence between them because Djokovic was waiting for the bus. So he's like passed his phone to Djokovic, and Djokovic has taken a selfie. It looks like it's through like a prison cell or something. It's ridiculous, but he got pictures with everyone, with everybody.
That's class. I think I'd be like that if I was at the Olympics too. I wouldn't be able to not. Like,
to be honest, like, that's like I didn't, and I kind of regret that a little bit. I wish I did take a couple, because I don't know if I'm not sure if I got any with any of the big dogs. I don't think.
Did you have any like interaction with the other sports or any of the big dogs? Did you have any interaction with any of the big dogs? Were there any like Olympic parties, or how was all of that stuff?
Yeah, so I think the one that, because Andy Murray was like head of I can't remember what they called it. It was like almost like captain of Team GB. So he had a fair bit of interaction with us. And he was a pretty funny guy. Like, we were playing sort of around the world table tennis with him and stuff like that, which was cool. But we had a holding camp, which was in Belo Horizonte before, which is kind of like a little mini training camp before you go into the Village. And there was the swimmers and the sprinters there. And I spent a bit of time with Harry Akins-Arite before. And
huge,
yeah, absolute unit, like ridiculous. Not an ounce of fat on that bloke. So we spent a bit of time with them in Belo Horizonte playing Mario Kart and stuff in the evenings, which was funny, but couldn't have two more differing sports. The swimmers are out there grafting their nuts off all the time. The sprinters are out on the track for like an hour and a half and then just come and start chilling afterwards. Like, it's completely different.
So did you meet Dina Asher-Smith and everyone as well?
Yeah, she was there. Yeah, she was there. Like, because that holding camp was pretty small, so we had like a little team area. So we were just there were little games rooms and that, and we were just there sort of with them, which is pretty cool.
Jeez, that's sick.
Yeah.
And and just in the whole terms of the Olympics, so it's obviously a lot of contrast between different nations. Like, Team GB was massive, Team Fiji wasn't so big. And then you're on about training camps. We all seen the videos of them running up sand dunes. I imagine you guys had like the most high-tech equipment available, did you?
Well, so we would have when we were there, but sort of beforehand, it was just like your normal kind of sevens pre-tournament training almost. So we were just like based at the Lensbury, doing our kind of usual stuff, obviously, but up tempo by a fair bit because we had we had tournaments to play before it. And we kind of got split into two teams in like the European tournament. So I can't remember what they're called. One was called the Lions and one was called the Royals. That was it. And so then we'd enter the FIRA tournaments against sort of your Russias and Spains and stuff. And then we'd play against each other as well. And that was like our trial games. So that was just kind of how intense it was. Like there's your opportunity to play and show Simon Amor whether you're ready to play or not. And you got 2 tournaments to do it in, plus training.
To be honest, in my head, I was thinking of Rocky 4 there, and Team GB were Ivan Drago and Fiji were Rocky.
But I think Fiji went to America for a little bit as well, actually, or maybe that was New Zealand. But yeah, no, their training camp looked pretty brutal as well. I'm sure everyone's was.
Yeah.
You said there that the technology was different at the Olympics. So how did the technology differ when you arrived in Rio?
Well, it's just kind of like you kind of had everything there. Like there was a gym, which obviously like there was plenty of people in. We didn't really use that because we'd have one close to where we trained. But in terms of just stuff to kind of keep you entertained, there was like a massive sort of games room, which was free for anybody to use in terms of any country and stuff like that. And then GB had their own one. And it just ran like a little village. Like there was shops, you could go get a haircut. There was a McDonald's as well in there, which got like busier and busier as the tournament went on. And it was, do you know, one thing that was kind of funny about that is you kind of looked at the start and you kind of lesser known countries, maybe who not, I wouldn't say weren't taking it as seriously, but probably didn't have maybe the nutritionists there to tell them sort of what to do and what not to do. So some of the lesser known countries were sort of in the queue at the start, and then towards the end there was everybody piling in there all sort of hours of the day, which was mental. But yeah, it was literally like a little village. I think there was even a tattoo artist there or something. Like it was just wild.
Was there
That's
much
crazy.
I've heard like rumors, and I just want to know, with the different when you're in the village and in camp, what's like the interaction between, is there much inter stuff between the men and the women, and all of the rumors that you get there?
So what I can say on that is that in the lunchroom, there's the condom machine is just there. So like everyone's obviously eating, and then if anyone goes to take one, everyone's just there to see him. So you get someone that would just do it and everyone's cheering and all that kind of stuff. It was wild. But you know what? I was disappointed about it as well, but we didn't get to see that much because we finished our tournament pretty early on. So I can't remember how long the Olympics goes on for, 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe. Might be longer, but I think our tournament finished in the first week. And we only could stay there for another 3-4 days. And then I think it was the kayakers had to come in to our spot in the village. So we didn't get to see the full craziness. We got to see some bits of it. But because Rio at the time was pretty dangerous, what they did was they set up after parties. People had so we had a GB house that we went to quite a few times, and then we had we went to the Dutch one, which was like literally like an underground sort of swimming pool little raving party. And then that was the French one that was like that, and then the Dutch one was just kind of like your kind of typical like it was Heineken everywhere and like a little pool and stuff. But the French one cracked me up because the 2 Welsh boys, we'd just finished the tournament. 2 Welsh boys were coming with pretty much the only other country in there. Everyone else is French, and they've got their 2 silver medals on, sort of just walking around, sort of showing it off to everyone. Just like this, everyone must have just been thinking, what absolute helmets. But it's some funny boys, those Welsh lads.
It must have been a good buzz though, bringing a medal back to camp, was it? Like, what did it feel like, Team GB, and you just contributed big time? Like, did it feel like that?
It was a weird. I don't even really know how to describe it, mate. It was weird. Like, I kind of woke up in the morning and just remember kind of like I put it in the cupboard, kind of take it out, and you're just like, this is pretty wild. Like, obviously I started 7th. Olympics wasn't even in it. And then you kind of sitting there thinking, here I am with an Olympic medal. It was pretty nuts. And then the next thing you're kind of thinking is, where can I go celebrate in terms of partying? And there's a funny video you boys should watch, actually. Rory McConaughey. So we had like some boys had appearances sort of afterwards. So like me, Ollie, Lindsay Hagen, one of the other boys had an appearance, but it was later on in the day, the next day, so it was fine. Like we could enjoy ourselves. And Rory McConaughey had one the next morning at 6 a.m. and he turns up, and it was on BBC Breakfast, I think, and he was absolutely steaming. Like eyes were gone, and they're asking him these questions, and he has absolutely no idea what's happening. I'll send you the video. It's absolutely amazing. Like every time we sort of get together, that video will come up. It's incredible.
And would the Olympic dream have been a thing when you were growing up? Like, you're pretty fast. Did you ever do athletics when you were younger, or?
I did once. To be honest, I found it really boring. Like, I think maybe it was the whole single person sport, even though I think I'd probably enjoy a single person sport now. But when I was younger, I loved watching athletics. And to be like, I loved the Olympics as well. It was like, we'd always watch it sort of as a family. So love the 100 meters like everybody else, that sort of thing. But obviously when you're sort of playing rugby, that wasn't even a thought. So that was very cool when that came into it. And that's probably what kept me in sevens that's definitely what kept me in sevens for a bit longer, for sure.
You're saying you're into it as a family. Who'd win the 100 meters in your house?
He would be a close contest. Right now, I think Anthony would probably win. I think when we were at our best, honestly, it would be a good race, because I think we both got the same top speed on GPS. So I don't know. I wouldn't let him win, but
you've the same GPS. The same top speed.
I think we got the same top speed GPS. Yeah.
And what is that?
10.3. I think 10.3. Yeah.
10.3 meters per second, or 10.3 for 100 meters?
No. 10.3 meters per second.
Jesus.
Yeah, 10.3 meters per second.
The speedsters.
Yeah.
Did you ever come up against Carlin Isles to test your pace, or Perry Baker?
Yeah, Carlin Isles actually. I was sweeping once and he broke through, and I just put my head down. I didn't even think to try and catch him, but I've just put my head down and just gone first 3 steps sort of thing. And I've looked up and I was like, oh, he's actually, I think I might be able to get him here. And then as I've kind of looked up, I've obviously massively just overchased, and he's just stepped straight inside me. So his speed is ridiculous. But in terms of rugby, Perry Baker in terms of sevens, he's the man. He is unreal.
He's a freak. Yeah, he played the arena football over there, and they played both ways. So that it was perfect transition into sevens for him, you know?
Yeah, he's a freak, genuine freak.
And who else? Did Nate Ebner as well that time? Remember, he played for the Patriots. He was a safety.
Yeah, he won the Super Bowl and then came over to the Olympics as well. It's a hell of a CV.
Crazy altogether. And who else? Team GB that time had Justin Rose won the golf, actually. Yeah. Were you there for that?
We weren't there for the golf, but he was in the gym with us a few times, and he's saying to us anyway, I don't know whether it's true or not, but he's saying to us he's pretty into his rugby. So we were chatting to him. At the time I was not into golf at all. Now I love golf. So at the time I was kind of it's Justin Rose, fair play. Didn't know much about him, but if I was to see him now, it'd be a completely different story.
So you had one chat with Justin Rose, and now you love golf, is it? You're watching Full Swing on Netflix.
Yeah, I finished it already. No, don't get me wrong, I was talking to him, but I didn't have much to say because I didn't play. Now, obviously, you play a little bit and love it.
So if Justin Rose listens to the podcast, Marcus, what do you want to tell him? What's your message for Justin Rose?
I just need some tips, mate, because I'm 5-putting everything at the moment.
So, Marcus, before we move on, we've covered the social side of the Olympics, but we haven't talked about the actual rugby. What was kind of the progression? You guys have done your 12-week camp. You go in, you got your first game, and tell us a bit about the journey of how you got to the final and then ended up getting that silver medal.
Yeah, so one thing that before we actually got there, one thing Simon Homore did that was unbelievably good was that team that played in the Olympics. That was the very first time that team, that 12, had ever played together before. And I think there was what he did was he sat us down, and I think there was a few articles that said sort of that's massively, that plays out of our favour hugely by the fact that we've never played together. He flipped that whole thing round and said, actually what it means is that other teams have never played against you guys before. They don't know what to expect. You're now the best of three nations, so you're stronger than you were before, essentially. They're all going into the unknown. You guys know what you're all about. You've been together now for a little while, and that kind of brought us all really together. And I think got people thinking like, you know, we went there with the idea to win something, to win the whole thing, obviously. And our first game was Kenya. I think our first game was Kenya, and we very much tried. Everyone will say this, normal tournament, that sort of thing, but it's not really, is it? Like when you're playing, it is essentially, but everything around that whole event, whole build up was nothing like a normal tournament. It's a big event. And in fairness, things all went pretty much to plan on day one. I think we beat Kenya. I can't remember who our next game was, but then we had New Zealand, which was the big game to get through to the quarters, and we beat New Zealand. So we finished day one thinking we're going well, like things are all going to plan. And to be honest, from my memory, I was pretty calm about the whole thing. Didn't actually think much about sort of making sure we get to the final, all that kind of stuff. We'd gone really well as a team. Then we played Argentina in the quarters, and that was absolutely hectic. Went to extra time. Dan Bibby scored in extra time. And then I think we were thinking, like, it wasn't that game, it was the next game. But yeah, that was a close one. Went to, obviously, extra time. We're thinking, right, this is obviously knockout rugby now. Like, we've got to pretty much switch on playing against South Africa, who I think at the time were number one. So it was a big game. And, Cubby, Cubby is plays for Scarlet. Used to play for Scarlets. He's retired. Jonathan Davies's brother.
Oh yeah, James Davis.
James Davies. He's the man, and like he's a funny boy, but he's like switched as soon as it came to rugby. He was switched on, like big style, and he pretty much turned around and was like, it's the first time he'd properly spoken. Like not obviously first time he'd properly spoken, but got sort of boys fired up about it. He was probably our best player of the whole tournament, and we were playing against South Africa. They scored a try and then made a break in the first half. Looked like they were scoring, and he tackles someone on the try line, gets a turnover straight away, and then Dan Norton scores in the second half. And then we've got 10 seconds left in the game. We're guaranteed to get into the final. We're 2 points up because they missed the conversion. So ball gets passed off a scrum down to Dan Norton. All he has to do is pretty much just run, either run for a second or two and kick the ball out. He has a full panic, kicks the ball long, stays in field, and we're thinking, oh my days. They play 3 or 4 phases. Fortunately for us, they knock it on and we're through to the final. And that feeling was incredible. But at the time, I remember thinking, what is he doing? Like, obviously, he's one of my best mates as well. And I was like, what has just happened? But thankfully, we don't even have to bring that one up with him anymore. And yeah, then we got to the final. And I was speaking to one of my old coaches before, and it was a weird one. I don't know if this is right or wrong, but this is just the way you think. Well, there is no right or wrong, but it's just kind of the way it was. We knew that the most nervous we were was before the South Africa game, because you kind of win that game, you're into a final, you're definitely getting a medal. And then it just felt like a bit of a pressure reliever in the final. We were bang up for the game. I wouldn't change anything in terms of how we prepped for that. But on the day, we just played against a Fiji team that were untouchable on the day. I can't remember what the end score was, but they wiped the floor with us. And there's something about playing Fiji sometimes where just if the bounce of the ball goes straight to them, there was a pass that by 9 times out of 10 would bounce straight into touch. It bounced right up into one of the Fijian boys' hands in the first play. And it was just one of those typical Fijian things where thinking today things are going their way kind of thing, I'm sure we could have turned it around, but it's just one of those Fiji sometimes when they're on, they're on. It was just one of those days.
Yeah, I mean, fair play, Marcus. You got a lot further than any of us did. So I got to say congratulations, massive.
Thank you.
And I mean, we've talked about a bit about the celebrations, but did your family get to fly out and watch the game?
Yeah, my mum and dad came out actually. I think they've done a fair bit of traveling when it comes to rugby, so I think they'd actually just gone from watching Anthony somewhere. I can't remember what tour it was, but yeah, they'd gone from watching Anthony and came straight to Brazil, which was, I was so happy they were there. It was incredible because obviously they'd come to the finals. So seeing them afterwards was pretty special. And then had a couple of drinks with them afterwards, and then we went off and kind of did our own thing for a couple of days.
Yeah, they're very lucky. I mean, they can, with the sevens especially, it's all over the world. So I'm sure they've been to some great places along the way to see you play some ruggers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with Anthony growing up, what was your kind of relationship like as brothers? Was it quite competitive?
Yeah, big style. Like in a well, I say in a friendly way. It is now that we're older, but when we were younger, probably not so much. But competing with everything with our youngest brother as well, Callum. All three of us were kind of going at it a little bit, and a fair few scraps and stuff when we were younger. And then Anthony and Callum probably scrapped way more than me and Anthony did. But yeah, in terms of competition, it'd be anything in the garden: football, rugby, PlayStation was actually the big one. But yeah, in terms of competitiveness, I think all three of us have got that kind of in us.
And the PlayStation, we talking FIFA, Rugby Ways?
A bit of both actually, but I think mainly FIFA actually. Yeah, mainly FIFA.
El Clásico.
Yeah, exactly. You get stuck into that one. No, it was good. It was very good.
And how old is Callum?
Callum's 3 years younger than Anthony as well, so he's now 25. Yeah.
Is he playing pro rugby?
No, so he did. He played for London Irish, actually. He played London Irish when he was really young. I think he played a Prem game at 18 or 17, but he had a lot of injuries. I think he had 11 hamstring injuries in 2 seasons. So then went to Richmond, and he's been at Richmond since, yeah. But then he's actually started doing some jiu-jitsu this year, and he might go back to Richmond at the end of next year, but he's taken a little bit of a break from rugby.
Yeah. I mean, the 3 boys in the house playing sports. Of course, you're going to breed some specimen of sportsmen there, right? So, I mean, then did you go across to watch the World Cup when when they got to the final at all? When Anthony was playing over in the World Cup in Japan?
Yeah, all of us did, which was awesome. Me and Callum flew over together and stayed in the same place in Japan. Literally, kind of a bit of a smash and grab. Like we had a game for Wasps the weekend after, so Dai Young actually let me go, which was awesome. But I couldn't stay for long, so I was literally there for 2 days. But it was unbelievable. It's just a shame. Obviously, they couldn't win, but a pretty special experience. I'm grateful that we got to go out there as well as a family, which was pretty cool.
And
was there any temptation for you to sign for a Japanese club after?
I hadn't even thought that. To be fair, I don't think my missus would be too keen on that at the time. Even though actually at that point we hadn't had a baby, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure she'd be too keen on Japan.
Which game did you watch?
Just the final. That was literally flew out just for the final. I had no plans to go to Japan at all. And then as soon as they got into the final, me and my brother and Anthony obviously helped us with the planning and stuff and just flew us out basically. My mum and dad were already out there. But yeah, me and my youngest brother went out just for the final. So literally 2 days, I think. We were in Japan for maybe a day and a half or 2 days and then flew straight back.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
What did the post-match events look like after the final took place there?
Yeah, this was what actually was one thing I was kind of, me and my youngest brother were kind of thinking about because there was like a family function afterwards. Just got wondering what some of the boys were like. And from age group stuff, I pretty much knew nearly everybody in the team, just from like, we had a one sort of, I think our under 18 team was stacked. So half the team or even 3/4 of the team was there. So I was really interested in what some of the boys were going to be like, or what the after sort of function was going to be like. But to be fair, the boys, like, obviously they were gutted, but it wasn't like you were going in there and it was like a funeral or anything. It was boys were sort of having a drink. I think people had realised there was nothing they could do about it, really, was there? So probably pretty happy to just be surrounded by family and friends and stuff, and it was pretty tame. But yeah, I don't think it stayed that way once we'd gone. I'm pretty sure they went out into town and probably had a good time.
Yeah, I would imagine so. You would hope so after such a long, grueling tournament.
Exactly.
So you've obviously travelled a lot. Out of all the countries you've been to, what's been your top 2 or 3?
So Japan actually is one of them for sure. I love Japan. I think it's so different to what we're. Have you guys been before?
I've never been to Japan.
No, it's just so different to what, like, us in sort of the UK are used to. Like, it's just so different, but love it. Great food as well. And where else did I really like? I really enjoyed Wellington, New Zealand as well. Just a very kind of relaxed style of life. I enjoyed that. Lovely people as well. And where's the other place? Could say Vegas, I guess. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Was that Vegas Sevens?
Yeah.
I'd say the culture in Vegas is unbelievable, is it?
Yeah.
The
food is unreal. Vegas it was a really weird tournament because we go from Wellington, which is like a small kind of it's a pretty small town. Stadium gets absolutely rammed for the sevens. And then we fly over to Vegas where the town is crazy and then no one's there for the sevens. So it's like 2 completely differing things. But yes, Vegas actually scares me a little bit, to be honest. People can go there and just lose everything they own in a minute. It's pretty nuts.
So who's lost everything they owned in a minute? Come on.
No one we were with, but we were next to somebody who had won 5. I think he just won. It's a big difference, but it was either 50 grand or 500 grand the day before. And like, it's just, he was just chatting to us and we were like, oh, how's your betting going? And he was like, yeah, I'm pretty up from yesterday, and told us how much. And we were like, that's absolutely nuts. There's just people there. And the thing is, he'll tell us that. The person who's probably lost a load won't say anything, which is just pretty scary. But yeah, it's an interesting place, mate.
And there you mentioned there isn't much of a crowd in the stadium. I always feel watching that. How does it feel as a player? Like, there must be some difference playing in the Wellington or Twickenham Sevens, where it's jam-packed, everyone's roaring at you, compared to, well, no disrespect, but to the Vegas Sevens. So there must be a difference as a player.
There definitely is in sevens, for me anyway. In 15s, I actually didn't notice it as much. I think it might be because in sevens, when it comes to game 5 or game 6, your body's pretty knackered. So sometimes that little pick me up, whether it's good or bad, in terms of like, I enjoyed Wellington so much just because the crowd boo England, and for some reason I find it just picks you up. Like, I enjoy it. But in sevens, come game 5, game 6, a little pick me up in terms of the crowd is probably pretty key. So that's probably the most noticeable thing I'd say.
Just Marcus, as an Irishman, I can't imagine why a crowd would boo England. I don't know why.
Everywhere we go, but Wellington was a different level. Like, they went so hard at us.
And in 15s, which grounds would have had good atmospheres in 15s? Obviously, Wellington is your favourite for sevens, I imagine. Like, for 15s, where would have had a good atmosphere?
Franklin's Gardens was pretty awesome. Where else? The Stoop generally, like, in terms of it being packed, was good. In terms of the stadium itself, I think the Ricoh Arena, well, I think it's called I can't even remember what it's called now.
Coventry Building Society Arena.
That's the one.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of a stadium, that one's pretty special, but I think the crowd's pretty good at Franklin's Gardens for sure.
And have you ever played like Munster or Leinster away?
Was it my first? I don't think it was my first game for London Irish. Might have been my first Champions Cup game or something. I was on the bench, actually. I don't know if I'd got on. I would have remembered if I got on, so I definitely didn't. But I was 18, and that was at Thomond Park, and that was an eye opener. As an 18-year-old. I can't remember that much when I was sort of 18, but I just remember being very nervous for that one. Like sitting on the bench because the crowd was in your face, big style. But I played there then again for Wasps 3-4 years ago. Yeah, that's an awesome place. Just how good.
When you were 18, you would have been like what happened in 2009? Like we were defending European champions, and
it was like that, I think. And we had a pretty good Irish team at the time, so it was a pretty big game. But
Champagne Happy and
that was like Leila Mapasua and
and
Elvis Evialiti with the centres, and like Ryan Lamb, Silosi Tajitakimbo, who was untouchable at that time.
Topsy Ojo, isn't it?
And Dylan Armitage, that was the back line.
Oh, geez, I remember. And Stefan hadn't broke through yet, had he?
No, Stefan had. Stefan was playing at that point, and he was probably the best player.
He's sick, yeah.
Yeah, it was a joke, mate. Like freakish. I've played with some good sevens before, and him and Jack Willis are probably up there as the two best.
Like, do you think Stefan's unlucky not to have more England caps?
Yeah, like absolutely. There's a few things, like just in terms of playing with him, there's not much he couldn't do. He could play 12 if you wanted to. Like he was quality. And I don't know how many he's got, but from obviously at that age, I wouldn't have been able to sort of tell you what an England player would necessarily. I couldn't say to you he should have X many caps, but now that I've sort of been around a fair bit, I can tell you that he was pretty special. So I don't know how many caps he got, but I'm sure he could have definitely got more.
I'm sure he's something crazy. Like I
He only
didn't
got
see single figures.
5 caps.
Yeah. I mean, he was special enough that I personally think he should have had way more than 5 caps.
And that was only in 2009 to 2010. It's like after that he was just kind of not really looked upon. I remember there was a period in 2013 when he was really playing well for Toulon, and everyone was saying, right, we need to get we didn't have like a out and out 7. Everyone was saying, and they were like, right, we need to scrap the overseas rule and bring in Stefan.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and did you ever look into playing in France, Marcus?
I did a little bit actually. Before coming here, actually, kind of was like I said, I didn't have too long to kind of properly search. Obviously, things get done in the background the whole time. Like it's not a case of like you get told you might not be staying at a club. You've still been looking beforehand. So I'd spoken to I kind of not spoken to a few. My agent had said, this club might be interested, that sort of thing, but nothing really concrete came through. And then France liked to do things late, and for me, it was already pretty late. Baby on the way at that stage. I kind of wanted to have something wrapped up. So yeah, I didn't really want to wait around too much for France, to be honest.
That's the French way, always on retard.
Yeah,
very, very late.
Yeah. And
then, but how's fatherhood been? How's the transition to fatherhood whilst being a player? How have you kind of found that balance?
It's awesome, mate. I like it. It's so good, and I'm lucky enough. My wife is a pretty special mother, so that helps me anyway. But it's an eye opener, that's for sure. Like, one thing I don't like doing is everyone always says the negative things straight away, because it's like, it is funny. Like, if your mates would be like, I had no sleep, all that kind of stuff. So I buy into that. But one of my good mates, Rich de Carpentier, who played sevens, like he just kind of said it to me straight away. He was like, look, mate, it's not easy, but it's the best thing that will ever happen. And it is pretty tough in terms of some of the sleep and things. But to be honest, there's not much you can do really. If your missus is sort of breastfeeding or whatever, there's nothing you can do in terms of the sleep. So in terms of that, when it comes to being a rugby player, it was a big change. But I was quite lucky that my brother's got a baby. I've got quite a few friends that have, so I had kind of people to talk to. And in terms of my professionalism, I don't think it's changed anything, to be honest. You just have to adapt a few things, maybe turn up to training a little bit earlier because you can't do stuff afterwards or things like that. And that's about it. I think it does make it a little bit more complicated when you're not at home. So you've probably got less people to help, but I'm quite lucky here as well. I've got a good friendship group with some of the foreign boys and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been really good, and I've enjoyed it.
Would you be someone who like thinks about rugby a lot off the training field or the playing field?
I reckon subconsciously I do. I wouldn't say I'm someone that I'm trying to think of out of people that I know. I think you get some people that will come back home and they bring their training to home quite a lot. I certainly do when it comes to probably more, like say, injuries rather than actual rugby. But yeah, I think I subconsciously would think about rugby a little bit at home, but mainly when I'm there, I'd like to think. I think my wife might think otherwise, but yeah, I don't think I try not to think about rugby too much. But when you're in it, it's just one of those things you'll be thinking about. You get text messages about the moves. What are you going to do this week? It kind of all just ends up happening. I'd like to think a reasonably healthy amount. I think about it.
And you're seeing the moves. So like I always wonder, like as a back myself, like are you texting in being like, here, I think this one would really work this week? Are fellas making them up themselves, or is it like a move that was prescribed in August?
Yeah,
like,
so it will change for each week. So actually, I'm pretty sure right now I'm getting messages like the defense coach just before I came on here said, have a look at this before. He's done like a clip. He's done a meeting, prepped it for tomorrow. So he'll be like, here's the meeting. If you've got any discussion points, then we'll talk about that one tomorrow kind of thing. And I guess but with that kind of thing, with your question in terms of like maybe saying, will this move work or whatever, I think two things are the older you get or the more you play in that certain team, you probably have a bit more of a say, feel a bit more comfortable. So kind of it all depends on your relationship with the coach, really. If you think something might work better and you've got a coach that will listen to you, which in my experience, those are the coaches that get the best out of the team, the ones that will listen to the players. And having played in some backlines with some characters who like to definitely have their own say on things.
Like Andy Good, is it?
I actually forgot I played with him, actually. Of course I did at Newcastle.
You forgot you played Randy Good.
And yeah, you definitely get some players that like to have their say on things. But and then kind of for me, I guess the older I've got, the more maybe I felt like I can kind of have a bit of a say. But yeah, a lot of the time, one thing James O'Connor said, which I agree with massively, there's loads of different ways to play rugby. Sometimes you just kind of be like, look, you try and get your bit in if you think it's going to work best for either the team or in some ways, especially as a winger, you want to touch the ball. So sometimes you want to just do some things that's going to help you and the back three out, because especially the way in some teams play rugby, it's quite tough to get the ball sometimes, you know?
Yeah. So like, who would have been them players that you would have seen in the back line and you can see they've thought it all through? Like with Jimmy Goppert, he looks like a code head. Like, would he have been talking it through, being like, look, Marcus, this is the move where I see you making the break, and if it doesn't come off, look.
Yeah. So at one point, I think it was, we had a back line where we had Danny Cipriani, Villy LaRue, Elliot Daly, Carl Eastman, who's unbelievably good, and Christian Wade, in fact. But
Curtly Beale?
No, that was the year before I came. Villy, I know they were there at the same time, but yeah, Villy was playing fullback at that point. And so we had some characters that know a fair bit about rugby and would like to get their opinion through, which was quality because you learned a lot. It also meant that some meetings would last a very long time, some pretty heated discussions and stuff.
Now, he's a fellow I always look at on the telly and I'm wondering, like, Willie LaRue, how chilled out is he playing the game? Is he shouting at you where to stand there? Is he just kind of like, I'll get there? Like, what's he like?
So he is the most chilled out bloke off the pitch you'll ever see. Big competitor, though. So competitive when it comes to rugby on the pitch. And like, I absolutely love playing with that bloke. Just like, as a winger, all he wants to do is get the ball to the wing. He would rather make an assist than score a try himself. He'll hit a crossfield just so the wingers can touch the ball. His whole thing pretty much was like, he'd wanted to get the ball in the hands of the people that he thought were maybe most dangerous or whatever. So you're playing on the wing. You wouldn't even have to move, and you'd get, 8 carries a game just from him passing you the ball, cross fielding you the ball. Like, yeah, he's a good fullback to play with if you're a winger.
Like you and Christian Wade on the wings, like just
Yeah,
skipping the ball.
Yeah, and then Josh Bassett as well. So there's a few of us that enjoyed playing with him for sure.
And who was the best player you've ever played with? You've got a few in the list, but if there's one that stood out the most.
Do you know who first comes to mind? And it's quite difficult to pick someone who's maybe the best. I could tell you like who's the best at certain things or whatever, but one person who just sticks to mind who I think maybe because he isn't spoken about as much is Carl Eastman actually. Like that guy, decision making like at the line was unbelievable. He was so talented, absolute freak, so powerful as well. I think when I was at Newcastle and I played against Wasps before, I I I had a counter attack and I got hit pretty hard and I looked up and it was Ash Johnson. So there was no surprise there. He's a pretty big lad.
You'd stay hit, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next time I played against Wasps, I got hit pretty hard again. And I was like, that must have been Ash Johnson again. I looked up and it was Carl Eastman, who's like quite a bit smaller than me, but he packs a punch like so powerful. But it's his skills that were just a joke. Like it's just something that people maybe didn't see quite as much. Just had a few injuries and stuff, but that guy's a talent.
But on the blocker move, like he was incredible at making that decision, wasn't he?
Insane, like insane, to the point where it kind of was like in training, it was just a bit of a joke. Like he's so good, and like his flat pass, like rugby league sort of end over end. Yeah, he's a skillful guy.
Wasn't him and Sam Burgess in the centres for Bath at one point?
Yeah, they would have been. I don't know if they. I'm sure they would have been. Actually,
Sam was playing 6.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
6 people at centre as well, I think. Yeah.
Did they play in the same Bath team together?
I think they did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think they did. I don't know.
Yeah, no.
They might have had like Eastman wearing the 13 jersey, but they used to swap for the blocker move and put Burgess running 13.
Yeah, like I would like to have played with him to be fair as well, but just to
Anthony was playing across in Bath at that point, wasn't he?
That's right. Yeah, Anthony played with both of them.
Yeah, and they would have had George Ford at 10.
Yeah, they got to the final with that. With I think George Ford, Carl Eastman, and JJ were the 10, 12, 13. I think. Yeah, that was a good Bath team.
That was a good year for Bath Rugby and all the Bath boys, because I remember watching the Six Nations. It was like 2013, 14 sort of time, and you had JJ tearing it up against the Welsh in Cardiff, George Ford at 10, and obviously your brother as well playing on the wing. I remember he made a great run against was it Italy or Ireland? Oh, probably the Irish, if we're being honest. But yeah, that was a good year for the Bath. Talking of the Six Nations, have you been following much last weekend?
I have, yeah. I've been watching a fair bit. I actually because obviously being in Italy, I've had a big interest in watching Italy actually in this one. I missed the first 15 minutes because I went to pick up one of the boys to watch over here. But I think I've watched every game so far, I think, or most of them. And the teams are all shaping up pretty well. It's in terms of some of the off-field stuff, maybe rugby-wise isn't going so well, but the on-field stuff is pretty good at the moment in terms of general rugby in all the leagues.
What's your kind of thoughts on the whole Wales situation with the strikes and everything?
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. Like, to be honest with you, I don't know too much about it in terms of I haven't done enough reading to give a real, honest sort of and sort of smart opinion. But it just what I feel like happens quite a lot in rugby is that the players do tend to get shafted a little bit. And it kind of seems like that's pretty much what's happening in Wales. And look, if there's no money to give, there's no money to give. But at the same time, I think it would have been really interesting if Wales did strike to see what would have happened, because I think it would have been, I don't know if that sort of thing's happened before.
Never in the Six Nations.
No, exactly. And it just would have been interesting to see how it went down. And there's just things for me that I find kind of interesting, like Netflix is doing a pretty good job at the moment of getting some of the sports like out there in terms of off the field stuff, which is bringing interest in. And obviously Netflix is doing it for this Six Nations now, which looks pretty cool. And it might have not put a great light on rugby, them showing this whole situation, but I think I saw something saying Netflix has been told they can't film anything involved in this Wales situation now, and I just feel like that's one of those things that should be in there just to kind of show people what's going on in terms of rugby. People might get a bit more of an understanding.
I completely agree with you. I think that's the one place Netflix should be.
Definitely.
Because then there'd be no question of why aren't people getting the money. Everyone in the world will know what's happening.
Exactly.
And then someone might step up and say, no, this isn't right. This is how it's going to be from now on. Like, that actually might be the thing that, well, not saves the sport, but that might be something that sets things on the right path, because it'll give us so much visibility. Like,
yeah, I completely, that's exactly what I think in terms of like, and then people will get a bit more of a general understanding of actually exactly what happened, if you know what I mean. People can see the way that the whole thing's worked. And because I saw something, in the worst place to get your information on for me is Twitter anyway, but I saw something before I came on here that there's been players that on sort of someone was saying 250k who have now been offered 30 grand a year, which is a big change up for something that maybe I don't quite understand, but it seems like too big a drop for it to just happen over one season. I just don't understand how that kind of thing happens, and it's not good for players and players' families and all that kind of stuff, you know.
100%. It must be so tough. Like, yeah, I can only imagine. But do you think as well though that that the players like could put themselves out there a small bit more prior to this to make it more marketable? Do you think, like, with the Welsh regions and things like that they should put more out there themselves to try and raise it? Or
players, you mean?
The players, should the players have made more of a
definitely. The one thing that I can understand about that is that players obviously will be worried to lose their jobs or whatever, but the problem is you see people standing up in other sports that are maybe sort of bigger than rugby, and it works out absolutely fine. It's kind of the start of something, and probably does need just one person to kind of stand up and say something or do something. But that's kind of just the way rugby is. And other sports people seem to market themselves very well, rightly or wrongly. But when it comes to sort of, I'm not a big social media guy at all, but you see some of these NFL guys who seem to be able to market themselves pretty well and do a pretty good job of that. And look, it's a completely different sport, completely different viewing figures and all sorts, and money involved. But rugby just seems to be getting left behind in some respects in some of these circles.
I think a lot of these big NFL players probably have like an agent or someone that's running their account, I would imagine.
Yeah, for sure. Like 100%, especially some of the ones that, like, you know, your Patrick Mahomes and stuff who can't afford to almost probably put a step wrong, or that, in fact, probably more likely they'll have someone who's smart enough to know the right things to do that probably will help his social media following and all sorts of kind of stuff like that. But at the same time, you've probably got some people that are smart enough that do a pretty good job on their own. I don't know who does, but there will be some people out there that would do a good job on.
Like Simon Zebo would be a great example of a rugby player that has went out there, and like everyone knows Zebo. Whenever he scores a try in Thomond Park, he does the Z.
Exactly.
His name, you know.
It's things like that. Like, a good person to speak to would be Christian Wade on the whole thing, in terms of, like, he's been there and seen it all, and he's got his own views on things, and he definitely is very different to me in terms of how he'll, like. I'm saying all this, and I'm a big example of someone who doesn't do that sort of stuff. Like, I don't sort of market myself out, but I don't think we're really in a situation where we can at the moment, because you kind of just look silly if you've not got a big enough following, if you know what I mean, to try and do that sort of stuff. But rugby needs to get to a point where it does.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And has there been any standout players for you that you've seen in the Six Nations so far? You've obviously watched every match apart from 15 minutes. And who's been the standout player for you?
Finn Russ was the first one to come to my mind. Like, I just enjoy watching him play, like, and little things like, one thing that is so impressive that I don't think people do talk about is the way he just brushes off a mistake and then does something that's such a, like 50-50 close call. Like he dropped a high ball in a pretty deep in his own half, manages to get it back, and then you're thinking, right, any other person's probably going to be a bit on edge here and just going to kick the ball into touch. And potentially you've seen it before where somebody only goes 10 meters because they're a bit sketchy. Next thing, he turns and hits a pinpoint crossfield kick in his own 22, and you're just like, that's quality. Like, he's just so good. I think he's awesome to watch. He'd be my standout probably so far. And then who else has gone pretty well?
James Lowe's been pretty good, I think.
James Lowe's been good. To be honest, the whole Irish team's been pretty good.
Caelan Doris has been class.
Yeah. The fullback's name it's just complete.
Hugo Keenan,
of course. He's been quality too.
Class, yeah.
Former Sevens player after your own heart.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's right. And he must be, in recent terms, he must be probably the big standout transitioner, I would have thought. Apart from the Kiwi boys, but yeah.
Obviously, Rico only played Sevens, but
yeah,
would you call him a transition player even?
No, because he was so young. But when he played, but yeah, in terms of athletes, you won't find much better than him.
Yeah, and you mentioned Finn Russell there. As a winger, how do you think it'd be to play outside him? Because obviously he throws them 50-50 passes. So like, how do you feel it'd be?
I think he'd be like playing with Villiers Leroux. Like I said, like he just wants to give people the ball with a bit of space, and he'll throw those passes. He'll kick those kicks. Like I see quite a lot of some of the stuff that Villiers does is similar to Finn in some ways. So I think as a wing, he's the kind of player you want to play with, and he'd be good fun to play with as well.
100%. And like Willie Leroux there, like would he be random or would he be very good in a video session to know, like, is it a complete risk that he just sees it in the moment, or do you think he's after analysing a team and now he's seen what he's analysed and now he's trying to pass?
He's a smart rugby player. Like I wouldn't say for him it's not an off the cuff thing. He's seen something, whether it's in the game or before the game or something like that. He's a smart rugby player, but I think he's actually someone as well that he'll very much. I think a little bit of him will be off field too. Like that's his natural go-to, is to try and throw those missed passes and throw those cross fields. So whereas somebody might see them as being half on, he'll see them as being on, if that makes sense. So he'll throw those passes. And for him, 9 times out of 10, they come off.
That's class. And Eddie Jones obviously went on to say about the private schools trains that out of people. Do you think that's the truth, or?
Yeah, there's definitely something in that. My big thing from when I was younger is like the best teams now, everyone's skillful on the pitch, 1 to 15. I think maybe English rugby was guilty of, when we were a bit younger, of just the forwards are just as big as you can make them, as strong as you can make them. And then the backs are the ones that will work on the skill. But I think you look at some of the best teams in the world, and from 1 to 15, their skills. England, like the England team now, is like that, you know. And we were lucky, like when we were younger, there was people. We had players. We had Mako and Billy Vunipola in our age group team. They were already massive, but their skill level was just a joke already, because they've just been, since they were young, they've kind of thrown the ball around, and I think they probably would have helped coaches and probably players see the benefits of skillful, bigger players. And yeah, that's my view on probably English rugby from when I was younger.
Yeah, I think Irish rugby would have been very much the same, but obviously Leinster have changed the game that way, and now all the skill sets have went with it. But yeah, it's interesting stuff.
So yeah, Marcus, this has been a great pleasure. This part of the podcast is now, we're finishing this part of the podcast so we can then jump onto the fan questions. So this part of the podcast is just going to be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and then we'll have the fan questions up on YouTube. So all the fans that want to listen to Marcus's fan questions, head over to Champagne Rugby on YouTube, and you'll be able to find the fan questions there. Just for the fans that have just been on the Spotify, where could they find you on social media?
I'd love to be able to remember what my handle is, to be honest with you. I think it's Marcus Watson 91. Maybe on both.
Yeah, Marcus Watson 91. Got it on here. Perfect.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. So thank you guys for listening to this podcast on the Spotify, and we'll see you over on the YouTube. So, Marcus, you ready for the fan questions?
Yep.
Rapid fire. Okay, we're just going to go back and forth. We've got the list. Me and Adam will just go there. Okay, so the first fan question is, who is your favorite player of all time?
Jason Robinson.
Ryan Hogan wants to know, what's your favorite try that you've scored of all time?
Maybe I scored one for Wasps against Leicester. I enjoyed that one just around the time of when it was as well.
Billy Tunks wants to know, how did it feel to know that you made it professional?
It was amazing, but it's one of those things that the best feeling was getting into the academy, actually. At 15 or 16, that was the best feeling. And then it's one of those things, I don't know if you'd say take it for granted, but when you kind of got my first contract, I'd kind of been hinted towards that happening for quite a while, if that makes sense. But I remember opening the letter, getting into the academy when I was 15, and that was sort of the big moment for me when I probably realised that I could be a professional rugby player.
Manu Rodriguez wants to know, who was your sporting hero growing up?
Jason Robinson, hands down. And then in some other sports, I enjoyed Steven Gerrard as well as a footballer. And yeah, I'd probably say, those two.
Dream back line.
Oh, of all time or now?
Of all time, you're in the squad. You're captain of the back line. Who are you picking?
9. I'll probably go with Dupont. 10. Dan Carter. 12. Marnonu. 13. Who would I go as 13? I'm not sure actually. One wing I'd have, the opposite wing I'd have my brother. And
Political, that was political.
And then at fullback I'd have Jason Robinson. 13. Who would I have at 13?
Marcus, you can't think about 13.
Without Brian O'Driscoll. I'll go Brian O'Driscoll, shall I? Yeah, I'll go with him.
Half the people who listen to this podcast are Irish. I don't think you'd be welcome back on if you didn't.
Yeah, O'Driscoll. It was always in my mind. I don't know why I just didn't say it. Yeah, it was O'Driscoll.
Do you prefer playing 7s or 15s?
Am I going to be boring and sit on the fence here?
You're not allowed to sit in the fence. You'll be pushed.
Yeah, 7s. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, I've said 7s.
It's said. Adam?
Yeah.
Who'd be the best 15s player at converting to 7s? That's not in the back three.
And who's not? Oh, it's not in the back three. That's a good question, that is. You know who'd be amazing, actually? Macalou, the French guy. The back rower. He would be some 7s player. I'll go with him.
Macalou, good call.
Mm-hmm. Who is this comes from a fan that wants to know the brother rivalry. He's asking who's the fastest, the strongest, and the best looking out of the brothers.
The easiest one out of the 3 is best looking. I'll put my hand up for that one. No, I was joking. I always tell Anthony that. The fastest, we'll both pick each other. So I'll say me. And then what was the other one?
Strongest.
Strongest. Anthony's stronger than me. Yeah, which is a shame.
If you weren't a professional rugby player, what would you be?
I wouldn't be doing much, I don't think, to be honest with you. I've been asked this before and I've never come up with a good answer. Peter Crouch has got a good answer if people wanted to check that.
And the last question is, if you had one piece of advice for your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
That discipline is more important than motivation.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a lot recently, and I have to agree with it.
Yeah, that'd probably be what I'd say.
Well, Marcus, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, and we'll wrap it up there. Make sure to follow Marcus over on Instagram. You can check out Champagne Rugby on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And if you need any questions regarding rugby recruitment, be sure to check out our page, Wolfpack Rugby Recruitment. And see you next week.